Masha Gessen, thank you very much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
You know, it's the first show.
I know. I'm very excited.
I did see your interview with Tony Jones on Monday on Q&A.
Right, that was very interesting.
He did use all the questions I was going to ask you. So I've only got a couple left over. So, typical of him. Tell me if I'm oversimplifying this.
Okay.
Okay. If the Russian mafia got drunk and had a one-night stand with the KGB, would the bastard child of that union be Vladimir Putin?
Probably. Although he might be flashier.
You think?
Well, if they actually got drunk, if they actually had an orgy, it might be something a little bit more charismatic than what they got.
If they had a good time,
right.
He would be a more interesting person.
Right.
Because your book is called The Man Without a Face. He was a boring man.
He was, and I think he still is. I think he's simple and uninteresting, and I mean, it also means he's very consistent. He pretty much acts the same way and says the same thing, and has been doing that for 12 years.
Now, Boris Yeltsin, you quote Boris Yeltsin as describing him as unobjectionable. This damning him with faint damning, isn't he, really?
Right. Well, that's not actually a quote. I think that was sort of the net result of his first meeting with Putin. He was introduced to him as his possible successor, and he apparently found him unobjectionable. Boris Berezovsky, the oligarch who was the kingmaker behind Putin, claims that Yeltsin also said, well, isn't he kind of small?
He's tiny. He's 5'6", isn't he?
Something like that, and we don't actually know for a fact. But
I would have thought, as a biographer, it would be your duty to at some point sneak up behind him and measure him.
I haven't really been allowed very close to him.
You've not met him? You've not talked to him?
I've not met him. I've been blacklisted as a journalist in Russia for 12 years, so I haven't had the opportunity.
I wondered about this book because, I'm terrified just sitting here talking to you about the possible reprisals that...
I think you're probably safe.
Do you think I'm okay? What about you, though? I mean, you have taken a risk writing this book. Would he read this book, or would he have someone read it for him and tell him the bullet points?
I get the impression that he doesn't actually know about the book. And I get the impression that the reason he doesn't know about the book is because somebody would have to tell him about the book.
He's not a big reader, is he?
He's not a big reader, but the more interesting point to me is that people are scared to tell him about the book. I mean, he's become that isolated and that much of a dictator that he's actually likely not to know something because people are afraid to tell him.
That works in your favour, though.
I think so.
The Russians do revolution very well. Do you see one?
We've had some practice.
Do you see one coming? Do you see one looming?
I do see one coming. In fact, I see one in progress. Putin's numbers have just absolutely plummeted, and we just got data this week that he's in the pits. So I think what we're seeing is the end of this regime. It might get worse before it gets better, though.
How does your book fare in that sort of environment? I mean, it will be read, I assume, by many in your country?
There isn't a publisher in Russia that is brave enough to take it on, because it might mean the end of their business. So it is on sale in Moscow in 2 stores owned by one person in English. So obviously it will have a very small audience comparatively.
All right. Well, so it's 2 shops in Moscow, just in case they hear this. We can advertise in Australia, but we can advertise in Russia. That's fine. Well, I enjoyed reading your book, and I enjoyed talking to you very much.
Thank you very much for
Masha Gessen,
having me.
thank you very much. Masha Gessen, ladies and gentlemen. Excuse me, I've got to go.